I've been lying motionless here for 36 hours, pressed against cold stone atop the highest spire of a Gothic cathedral, waiting to kill a man I've never met. The midnight rain washes over my sin-skin body glove and drips from the barrel of my Exitus rifle, but I remain as still as a gargoyle. Far below, the grand plaza is lit by flickering torchlight and the neon glow of holo projectors. A crowd has gathered in anticipation of the planetary governor's midnight address. They have no idea that, high above them, death is waiting patiently in the shadows. Patience. It's the first lesson they beat into us at the Vindicar Temple, and Emperor knows I've had a lot of practice. If patience were a virtue, I might be the most virtuous man on this Emperor-forsaken planet right now. A slight smirk tugs at my lips at the thought, hidden behind the impassive mask that covers my face. Of course, virtue has nothing to do with it. I wait because that is my duty. I wait because one shot, one kill can end a war before it begins. I wait because I was made to wait. The target will appear soon, Governor Marius Callistus, beloved by some, suspected heretic by others, and marked for death by the Officio Assassinorum, by my masters, by the Emperor himself as far as I'm concerned. Officially, I'm here because intelligence says Callistus plans to renounce Imperial authority tonight, possibly to hand this world over to sedition or Xenos influence. Arcadia 7 is a vital hive world, and one man's treachery here could ignite rebellion across an entire sector. The High Lords would not risk a drawn-out war. Better to make a swift, surgical example of him. Unofficially, well, nothing is ever unofficial when you're an Imperial assassin. Sanctioned or not, every kill carries the weight of the Golden Throne's judgment. I adjust my position ever so slightly, the sin-skin of my stealth suit silently stretching with me. Through the scope of my rifle, I scan the balconies and the podium below for the 100th time. The crowd's murmurs echo up the stone buttresses of the cathedral. Pilgrims and citizens, oblivious to the crosshairs passing over their heads. I can pick out individuals even at this distance. A mother clutching her child, a squad of PDF troopers standing at attention, a robed priest leading a prayer. None of them matter. Only the governor. Only the target. A red targeting rune blinks faintly on my spy mask's display, synchronized with the rifle's auspex. No sign of Callistus yet. I slow my breathing, one breath every minute, a timing I've settled into to keep myself calm and ready. My heart rate is a steady whisper in my ears, slower than most people achieve even in deep sleep. For me, this is focus. Lying in the rain, on the verge of ending a life. It's almost tranquil. It wasn't always like this. Tranquility, focus. In another life, another lifetime ago, I might have been one of those souls down in the plaza, craning my neck in the rain to catch a glimpse of my planetary lord. In another life, I might have been ignorant, ordinary, alive. But that life ended long ago in the fires of war and the cold corridors of a Schola Progenium. As I wait here, memories claw their way up unbidden, as they sometimes do during these long vigils. Images from decades past flicker through my mind. I allow them in, but only a little. A sniper must control even his own thoughts. Too much distraction and you miss the moment. But tonight I have a few minutes yet, and my mind wanders to the path that led me to this perch, this mission, this life in the shadows. I remember the orphanage, the echo of drill sergeants' boots, the first time I held a rifle with purpose. I remember the oath I swore to the Emperor, with blood on my hands that wasn't mine. I remember becoming something more and less than human. Life of an Imperial assassin is not measured in years or friendships or achievements. It is measured in kills, in the removal of obstacles to humanity's survival. It's a grim ledger, but it's mine, And it began on a world far from here, in blood and in fire. It began with fire. My earliest clear memory is of my home burning around me. I was 8 years old, crouched under the charred remains of my family's hab unit on a backwater colony world whose name I barely recall. Volantis? Valeria? It's little more than a blur of screams and smoke now. Rebels had come to our town, traitors against the Imperium who thought our remote settlement easy prey. They were right. I remember the night sky glowing orange as promethium fires devoured everything I knew. I can still see flashes of that night behind my eyes. My mother hurrying me into a closet, her face streaked with soot and fear. The thunder of gunfire outside. My father's voice yelling something about the Emperor and holding the line, just before a deafening explosion blew out our walls. Then, chaos. Heat, smoke, the choking smell of burning plastic and flesh. When I emerged from my hiding place, hours later, it seemed, the world had gone eerily quiet. The firefight had moved on to the next district, leaving our street in ruin. Bodies lay strewn in the rubble at odd angles. I recognized some of them even through the blood and soot. A neighbor woman who had once given me a sweet bun on Saint's Day, now limp and half-buried under a collapsed wall. The Hab's old custodian, his torso crushed by a fallen girder. And then, there, amid the ruins, I found my parents. I stumbled over my father's body. Half of him was buried under a slab of collapsed masonry. There was so much blood, too much for an 8-year-old's mind to comprehend. A figure loomed out of the haze, a man in the flak armor of the traitor militia, his eyes wild with victory or combat drugs. He spotted me and raised his las rifle. I was just a scrawny kid, half-deaf and terrified. But in that moment, something strange happened. Time seemed to slow. Maybe it was shock or the first stirrings of whatever killer's instinct the Emperor bred into me. I didn't think. I just moved. My hand closed on a shard of broken glass from our shattered hab window. As the rebel lunged, I slashed out blindly. By sheer chance, the jagged glass caught him across the throat. Warm blood sprayed my face, and suddenly the man was writhing on the ground, clutching a neck that was no longer there. I stared as he gurgled out his last breath at my feet. The first life I ever took, claimed in desperation and fear. I wish I could say I felt sorrow or horror. Perhaps I did, for an instant. But what I remember most clearly is the quiet that followed. The only sound was the traitor's choking death rattle, mixing with the crackle of distant fires. And how I, a child drenched in blood that wasn't mine, felt, perhaps it was just numbness. Or perhaps in that single violent act of survival, my fate was sealed. Dawn broke gray and ugly over the settlement. Imperial reinforcements finally arrived, the local planetary defense force, and a black-armored RB-TESS officer sweeping through to cleanse the last rebels. They found me sitting on the rubble next to the corpse of the man I had killed, my dead parents just a few meters away. I must have been a ghastly sight, small, soot-blackened, with a 1,000-yard stare that no child should have. A grizzled PDF sergeant carefully took the improvised glass knife from my hand. An Adeptus Arbites marshal questioned me briefly, but I had little to say. What was there to say? My world was gone. By that evening, I was just another war orphan among dozens of others being loaded onto a Valkyrie transport. We were bound for an orphanage off-world. The administratum official in charge droned on about duty and how we would be cared for by the Schola Progemium until we could serve the Emperor. I don't think I uttered a single word. I remember the other children crying or staring hollowly as the gunship lifted off, leaving behind the only home we'd known. I remember clenching my jaw and resolving not to cry. The tears never came. Perhaps they'd been burned out of me, thus ended my life as a normal boy of the Imperium. Parents, home, innocence, all gone in a single night of heresy and flame. I was cast into the Emperor's hands in the most brutal way possible, but in the Imperium such origins are common enough. The Schola Progenium awaits many war orphans like me, forging the next generation of the Emperor's loyal servants, stormtroopers, commissars, clerics, and in the most unusual cases, assassins. The Schola Progenium was a world unto itself. They shipped us to a sprawling ecclesiarchy orphanage on the agri moon of Saint Dominica, where every waking moment was devoted to forging us into the Emperor's faithful. I traded one harsh regime for another. In place of rebel gunfire and burning homes, I now had drill abbots barking orders at dawn, catechisms to memorize, and endless physical drills. It was salvation of a sort, structured, disciplined, merciless. Exactly what a broken kid like me needed, though I didn't realize it at the time. We woke before sunrise to the clanging of a prayer bell. Days were filled with schooling in Imperial doctrine, weapons training, and physical conditioning. Each day followed a strict regimen. We rose before dawn to the clanging of that bell, then assembled for an hour of intense physical exercise in the pre-dawn chill. By sunrise, our muscles ached from endless push-ups, sparring drills, and endurance runs around the Schola's high-walled courtyard. After a brief breakfast of flavorless protein gruel, we spent the morning in classrooms studying Imperial scripture, history, and doctrine. A single lapse in concentration or a wrong answer in catechism could earn a sharp rap across the knuckles from a drill abbot's cane. Midday brought weapons training, disassembling and reassembling less guns against the clock, live fire target practice under the watchful gaze of commissar instructors, or bayonet drills until our arms trembled. In the afternoons, we endured more physical trials, obstacle courses in full gear, hand-to-hand combat sessions where only victory or unconsciousness marked the end. Evening prayers were followed by menial duties, scrubbing floors, polishing Aquila icons, washing our threadbare uniforms, tasks to instill humility and discipline. Only once the Schola's halls were spotless were we permitted a thin dinner and a few brief hours of exhausted sleep on wooden cots. This was life at the Progenium, a relentless cycle of obedience, pain, and prayer. I quickly learned that excelling in the Schola brought two things: more responsibility and more scrutiny. I was smaller than some of the other boys, but what I lacked in size I made up for in intensity. During live fire drills, my shots found the mark more often than not. During hand-to-hand combat training, I fought with a ferocity that sometimes unsettled even the instructors. One incident still stands out in my mind. An older cadet, a bully named Kerr, thought he could make sport of the quiet kid from Volantis. He made the mistake of sucker-punching me in the sparring yard one evening, hoping for an easy target. I saw red. When it was over, Kerr was on the ground missing 3 teeth and his arm broken in 2 places. I was standing over him shaking with rage, barely a scratch on me. The drill abbots gave me 10 lashes for excessive brutality. Ironic, considering they're the ones who taught us to be ruthless. But I also caught a look in the headmaster's eye as they dragged me to the whipping post. He wasn't exactly displeased. The Schola bred many fine soldiers, priests, and officers, but there were always a few of us who were different. The ones who took to the violence a little too readily, who didn't flinch when reciting the litany of sacrifice, who maintained a cold, frightening calm under pressures that made others crack. We were the ones the Schola's overseers watched closely, for we might be marked for a destiny beyond even the commissariat or stormtroopers. I had no name for that destiny then, but whispers circulated among the progena. Now and then, one of the fiercest cadets would simply vanish overnight. A girl who excelled at poisons and showed no mercy in war games. A boy who could shoot the wings off a flitterbird and never hesitated to pull the trigger on a simulated civilian if ordered. We concocted wild rumors in the dormitories that they'd been taken by the Inquisition or inducted into some secret order. Some said those pupils were executed as dangers. Others insisted they were elevated to the highest service. We had no proof, just ghost stories shared under flickering lumen strips after lights out. I didn't much care for rumors. I kept my head down, focused on my own improvement. Every sermon about the Emperor's wrath found fertile ground in me. Every combat scenario I treated as life or death. Perhaps I was trying to prove something, that I deserved to be alive when my parents were not. Or maybe I was simply venting the quiet fury that still smoldered inside. Either way, I gained a reputation. Brother Cadet Ralik, for that was the name the schola had given me, though I seldom used it, was as devout and deadly as they come, but eerily taciturn. My academic marks were adequate, my marksmanship scores top of the class, and my discipline absolute. The day of selection came without warning. I was 15. We were assembled in the chapel hall, 100 teenage progena standing at attention in our threadbare gray uniforms. The headmaster, an aging canoness with a cybernetic eye, informed us that representatives of the Officio Assassinorum were observing. At this, a frightened hush fell over the hall. The Officio Assassinorum. The very name was spoken in whispers. We all knew of the Imperial assassins, agents of death who served the High Lords. To hear that some might be among us, evaluating us for Emperor knows what, set my heart pounding despite my training. I remember standing ramrod straight, eyes ahead, as instructors called out a handful of names. Each named student stepped forward, met by tall, silent figures in hooded cloaks who seemed to appear from nowhere, then led out of the chamber. My name was the last one uttered. Cadet Ralek. I stepped out of line, marched forward. A black-clad stranger, I never saw his face, only the glint of a rebreather mask under his hood, put a firm hand on my shoulder. In that moment, I felt something between terror and triumph. I was being taken. For what, I still didn't know. But some part of me believed this was what I'd been waiting for. As quickly as they had come, the assassins departed with their chosen in tow. I had just enough time to catch a final glimpse of the chapel, the wide eyes of my fellow progena, the faint smile on the headmaster's lips, before I was led into darkness. They took us through silent corridors to a landing pad where a shuttle waited. No goodbyes, no explanations. We were simply gone, whisked away from the only life we knew and into the embrace of shadow. From that day onwards, my only true friend was death itself. They kept us sedated for the journey to Terra. I recall brief moments of consciousness on the shuttle to a larger void craft, just the vibration of engines and the sense of others lying in suspension around me. Perhaps they didn't want us panicking or trying to kill each other unsupervised. When I truly awoke, it was to a harsh, bright light and the sound of someone shouting orders in a clipped Terran accent. I found myself and roughly 20 other youths in the bare metal hold of a starship, all of us wearing simple gray jumpsuits. Groggy and confused, we struggled to our feet. That's when the trials began. There was no gentle orientation, no explanation of what was happening. The unseen instructors simply began pushing us to our limits from the first waking moment. On that first day, they herded us into a sealed chamber and pumped the atmosphere thin to see how long we'd last before blacking out. Those who lost consciousness were revived and dragged to the next test. They gave us blades and dropped us in darkness, instructing us to be the last one standing. I remember the screams and scuffles in that pitch-black maze, the way I pressed my back to a cold wall and strained my ears for any hint of movement. I remember eliminating 2 other recruits who blundered near me, silently slitting their throats from behind. Better them than me. Only later did I learn that one of those 2 had been a boy I'd shared a meal ration with earlier that same day, one of the few fellow aspirants I'd exchanged a friendly word with. That realization should have horrified me, but at the time I was too numb to feel much at all. If anything, it served as the final severance of any lingering attachment. In that trial by darkness, I understood fully. In this life, friendships were as fleeting and disposable as spent shells. When dim lights flickered on, only a handful of us were left panting and blood-spattered, blades in hand. There was no praise for the victors, just a curt order. "Clean yourselves! Next test!" They starved us, exposed us to extreme cold and heat, forced us to solve complex puzzles under debilitating fatigue. We spent what felt like an eternity in that routine, trial after trial designed to break us or harden us. In one particularly cruel test, they locked us in a voided compartment with only a limited oxygen supply to share. One boy panicked and tried to fight his way to the front, where the air was fresher. He was strangled by another desperate recruit. I just closed my eyes, conserved my breaths, and waited. I learned that trick at the Scola when food was scarce or bullies were hunting. Make yourself small, invisible, and endure. By the time our transport reached Holy Terra, less than half of us remained alive or sane. Out of the perhaps 20 aspirants that set out, maybe 8 stumbled off that ship under the golden light of the throne world. I was among them, though gaunt and bruised. I'll never forget the first breath of Terra's air, thick, incense-tinged, and strangely warm, filling my aching lungs as I emerged onto a high-security landing platform. We had arrived. Terra, birthplace of humanity, seat of the Emperor. I might have wept with awe if I hadn't long since forgotten how to weep. We were kept under heavy guard as silent sisters of silence and towering custodes shepherded us from the landing site into the depths of the Imperial Palace's shadowy outskirts. It was night, or what passes for night beneath the endless smog, and I only caught a glimpse of the Terran sky through a break in the clouds. There were countless ships in orbit, and the lights of a million pilgrims crawling toward the distant glow of the Imperial Palace. But we were taken the opposite way, downwards into secret tunnels known only to a few. Our group of survivors was divided almost immediately. Senior officials in Assassinorum garb, each representing a different temple, though we did not yet fully grasp what that meant, assessed us like livestock. They exchanged data slate notes on our aptitudes and psychological profiles. Then, one by one, we were separated. The more psychotic and uncontrollably violent candidates were hauled off in restraints by agents of the Eversor Temple. I recall one frothing boy being dragged away while sedated, destined to become a berserk killer pumped full of combat drugs. The eerily quiet, pale girl who never seemed to blink was gently escorted by an operative of the Culexis Temple. I later understood she must have been a blank, soulless and perfect for that cursed duty. A charismatic, sly-eyed lad named Shen, who had a gift for voices and deception, was claimed by the Calidus Temple, likely to be fed the shape-shifting drug and remade as a weapon of subterfuge. And me? I was met by a tall, slender woman with cybernetic eyes and the emblem of the Vindicar Temple etched in silver on her breastplate. She looked me up and down, noting my steadiness and the way I met her gaze without flinching. "This one will do," I remember her saying coolly. Without another word, I was handed over to the Vindicar cadre. From that moment, I belonged to the Temple of Snipers and Marksmen, the silent predators who kill from afar. In rare moments of rest in those early days, I found myself wondering about the others who had been spirited away to different fates. What became of those recruits destined for the other temples? The thought was fleeting. Our conditioning discouraged idle curiosity. But in the darkness before sleep claimed us, I sometimes imagined their new lives. The ever-sore acolytes, for instance, poor souls shaped into living engines of destruction, pumped full of combat drugs and sealed in stasis between deployments, only to be unleashed as frenzied berserkers when needed. A short, blazing existence of fury and self-immolation, that was their lot. And the Calaides trainees, masters of deception who would spend their lives wearing stolen faces, using the Xenos polymorphine drug to assume the shapes of others. How many of them would lose themselves entirely in their masquerades, I wondered, no longer certain who they were under the myriad personas. Then there were the Colexis candidates, the blank-souled pariahs. Even during our brief encounter, I sensed the unnatural emptiness around that one girl taken for the Culexis temple. She would be trained to hunt psychers, to be the bane of witches and demons, but at the cost of being feared and shunned by all living things for the rest of her days. In a way, hers might have been the loneliest path of any of us. There were even whispers of temples beyond those four main clades, the Venenum, whose stock in trade was subtle poisons, or the Vanus, masters of data and sabotage. If they existed, they were kept utterly secret. I never saw obvious evidence of them. In the end, I felt a grim satisfaction that I had been selected for the Vindicar Temple. My temperament and skills fit its discipline well. I preferred the cold clarity of a rifle scope and the patience of the hunt over the blood-crazed charge of an Eversor, or the identity games of a Calidus. Whatever trials lay ahead for me in the Vindicar Temple, I accepted them as my sacred duty, and perhaps, on some level, as my refuge from fates I deemed far worse. They brought me into the Vindicar Temple's hidden enclave beneath Terra's surface, a place of shadows and silence. If the Schola Progenium was strict, the temple was absolute. My new life made the orphanage seem like a kindergarten. Here, for the next 10 standard years, every single day would be devoted to perfecting the art of death. Training at the Vindicar Temple was relentless and all-encompassing. We were few, only a dozen initiates in my intake, and the training staff made it clear that not all of us would make it to full induction. In the temple's eyes, failure was death, whether literal or by washing out into some lesser fate. We rose each day in darkness and began with the litany of the marksman, reciting verses that extolled patience, precision, and faith in the Emperor's judgment. The Vindicar doctrine was drilled into our skulls. Exitus acta probat. The outcome justifies the deed. We were instruments of the Emperor's wrath. Nothing more, nothing less. Mornings were spent honing our bodies, hours of calisthenics in crushing gravity fields to build endurance and strength, followed by martial arts sparring that left us bruised and broken. The temple instructors took special pleasure in pitting us against each other in asymmetrical fights, 2 against 1, blindfolded against armed, fatigued against fresh. They wanted us adaptable, able to fight outnumbered and under every disadvantage. Pain became a constant companion. Pain is an illusion of the senses, despair an illusion of the mind, one instructor barked at us as we held stress positions for hours. I repeated that mantra in my head until I believed it. When you believe pain is merely an illusion, you can make your body obey even as it screams. Afternoons shifted focus to the tools of our trade. Marksmanship training was our sacred right. We spent countless hours on the range, firing solid slugs and less rounds at targets at every conceivable distance and angle. Under the scorching artificial sun of the temple's firing grounds, I learned to shoot from prone, kneeling, running, sliding. They trained us to hit moving targets while we ourselves were moving, to compensate for wind, gravity, and environmental distortion without a second thought. The smallest error earned swift correction. More than once I saw a student who consistently missed the mark taken away, never to return. The standards were terrifyingly high, and they had to be. A Vindicator's one perfect shot can shape the fate of an entire war. 3 things matter in marksmanship, our rifle master intoned one day, a rare hint of humor on his scarred face. Location, location, location. We laughed quietly. An actual joke, imagine that. But we took the lesson to heart. Choose the perfect vantage point. Aim for the precise vital spot. Pick the ideal moment. Location, location, location. Our rifles themselves were reverent objects to us. Early in training, we practiced with training las guns and mock weapons. But as we proved ourselves, we were each issued a sacred tool, the Exitus rifle, customized to our grip and style. The first time I held mine, cold black steel, surprisingly balanced in weight, I felt a thrill I'd only experienced once before, as a child clutching that shard of glass to survive. This was a piece of death I could call my own. We learned every part of that weapon, how to strip and clean it blindfolded, how to appease its machine spirit with the proper oils and canticles as if it were a living companion. In effect, it was. A Vindicator and his rifle are extensions of each other. But marksmanship was only one facet of our education. They taught us infiltration and stealth to the point of obsession. We became phantoms. In the dead of night, they would release us onto the streets of a Terran underhive and give us objectives to approach without being detected by patrolling servitors and arbitrators. Many nights I spent crawling through vents and sewers, blending with crowds of the unwashed masses, or clinging to the underside of hover trams, all to reach a target location unseen. If you were caught or even noticed, you failed and faced disciplinary correction. I learned to move like a shadow, to time my breaths to passing noise, to make no more sound than a falling feather. We studied the arts of disguise and survival as well. A Vindicator might have to spend weeks alone behind enemy lines waiting for the shot. So they taught us how to live off nothing, to find water in a desert, to eat things that would turn a normal man's stomach, to build shelters from debris. They taught us to endure absolute solitude and silence. I recall an exercise where they sealed me in a lightless cell for a month with only minimal nutrients pumped in, just to see if I'd lose my mind. I didn't. I sat, recited the litany of steadfastness, and imagined the sound of my heartbeat as the Emperor's marching drums. When they finally opened the cell, I blinked at the light, stood up, and walked out without a word. That was the moment, I think, the instructors truly began to trust my fortitude. Mental fortitude was as important as physical. Hours of each day were devoted to study. We ingested volumes of knowledge, the anatomy of every known species and how best to kill them, the schematics of common vehicles and void ships. A well-placed shot to a fuel line can do more than an army, after all. The histories of infamous assassinations that shaped the Imperium. They even drilled into us the origins and heavy burden of our shadowy trade. In rare classroom sessions between brutal drills, we were taught of the Officio Assassinorum's founding and its checkered history. We learned that during the Emperor's Great Crusade, it was Malcador, the Sigillite, the Emperor's most trusted counselor, who first formalized the Assassinorum. Malcador became the first Grand Master of Assassins, overseeing the original temples on Terra at the Emperor's behest. The names of those temples were given to us like a litany: Vindicar, Calidus, Venenum, Vanus, Eversor, Kilixas, each specializing in a different aspect of the art of death. We took pride knowing our Vindicar temple was among those hallowed founding clades. They recounted legendary missions from ages past, how during the Horus heresy, in the darkest hour of the Imperium, an execution force of all temples was deployed to strike at the arch-traitor Horus himself. That attempt ultimately failed, a rare and sobering failure for our kind, but it underscored the importance of our role. We heard how, centuries later, during the Age of Apostasy, the Assassinorum was nearly corrupted from within by a renegade Grand Master in the aftermath of Goj Vandare's Reign of Blood. In the so-called Wars of Vindication, assassins battled assassins under the Imperial Palace itself until the traitors were purged and the Officio was set under tighter watch by the Inquisition's Ordo Secreus. These cautionary tales were etched into us. We are the Emperor's scalpel, but if we are misused or if we falter in loyalty, the consequences can shake the Imperium itself. It was made abundantly clear through historical example and daily indoctrination that as assassins we do not exist for personal glory or vendetta. We exist solely as instruments of the Emperor's will. We do not determine the guilty. We do not decide the punishment. We are merely the cold instrument of the Emperor's vengeance, an instructor quoted from the ancient decree of the Assassinorum. At the time, I absorbed those words without question, accepting that I was to be a weapon with no agency beyond what my masters dictated. Key to the uncanny might of the Imperial assassin is the surgery we underwent during our 10 standard years of tutelage. Augmentative nodes were stitched into our brains, and submuscular acoustic surgery prepared our bodies for the punishment that would be visited upon them in the line of duty. The level of arcane technology used was perhaps the most advanced the Imperium could provide. For good reason, it was constrained to holy terror to minimize any chance of it being captured by the enemies of man. It is well that such ancient techno-magics are revered so and maintained with painstaking care. Without them, the polymorphic drugs and reality-shifting devices used by the more esoteric temples would literally tear their operatives apart. Even if an Imperial assassin survived their training, their leash was still held suffocatingly tight. Only by a successful petition to the High Lords of Terror themselves and a two-thirds majority vote in the Senatorum Imperialis can an assassin be sanctioned and released into the galaxy to complete the task they were born to do. The fact that the ultimate luminaries of the Imperium give their direct attention to the deployment of a single individual shows just how exceptional these killers are. The records of the Officio Assassinorum temples are as detailed as they are scrupulous, a source of great pride to the masters that watch over them. Across the millennia, occasions where the dispatch of an operative has not resulted in the desired outcome are extraordinarily few and far between. Be the target man, witch, beast, or demon, the result is always the same: one dead enemy of the Emperor. After a decade of unrelenting training, the day of reckoning, our final initiation, arrived. Our numbers had dwindled to only 5 out of the original 12 in the Vindicar cadre. We stood at attention in the temple sanctum, dressed in newly tailored sin-skin stealth suits that clung to us like shadows. Before us, on an obsidian plinth, lay our graduation gifts, the tools of our office. Each of us was called forward in turn. When my designation was called, I stepped up and knelt. The Temple Master, the same cyborg-eyed woman who had first claimed me for Vindicare, loomed above like a specter of death. In a clear, cold voice, she intoned the rites. "Who do you serve?" My reply was automatic, the answer beaten into my soul. "I serve the Emperor of mankind, now and until my last breath." "What is your creed?" she asked. "Exitus acta probat," I answered firmly. "The outcome justifies the deed." The words tasted of iron and truth. She nodded and reached for the items on the plinth. First, she presented me with a long, elegantly deadly Exitus rifle, its dark metal surface inscribed with purification etchings. I took it in my hands reverently. Then an Exitus pistol, compact but immensely powerful. I holstered it at my side. Finally, she produced a sleek black helmet-like device, the Vindicare spy mask. As she fitted it over my head, my vision swam with data as the mask interfaced with my augmetics. Targeting reticles, rangefinders, communication feeds, all blinked Alev. Through that mask, I could see the world in infrared, ultraviolet, zoom in to count the pores on the Temple Master's face if I wished. It was like gaining a sixth sense. "Rise, assassin," the Master said quietly. "Welcome to the ranks of the Vindicar Temple. Go forth and enact the Emperor's vengeance upon those who defy him." No grand ceremony, no applause. Just like that, I was a full Imperial assassin, a bringer of death sworn to the Golden Throne. I looked to my left and right, seeing my few remaining classmates donning their own masks and collecting their rifles. We exchanged brief nods. There was respect there. We had survived the Forge together, but also distance. We all knew we might never see each other again. Our lives from here would be spent alone in the darkness, each of us a solitary hunter assigned to different corners of the galaxy. Thus I stepped out of the temple sanctum not as Cadet Rallick, but as something else entirely. Officially, I suppose I was Operative Number 617 Alpha, or some similarly bureaucratic designation. But in truth, I had shed my name, my past, even much of my humanity. I was a Vindicare assassin now, a weapon to be stored until needed, then unleashed without hesitation. A ghost with a rifle, bound by duty and indoctrination to kill in the Emperor's name. I'd like to say I felt proud at that moment. Perhaps a part of me did feel a grim satisfaction. I had endured the worst and emerged sharpened, lethal, ready. But overwhelmingly, I felt an emptiness, a quiet void where once human feelings might have dwelt. They had cut out my doubts, my fears, even many of my desires, leaving only purpose. It was a sacrifice I made willingly, even unknowingly, over those 10 hellish years. The person I could have been died on that training ground, piece by piece, replaced by the assassin I had become. There was no time to dwell on it. Within hours of our induction, our real work would begin. The call for blood would come swiftly. Little did I know how soon I'd be made to prove my worth on an actual mission. I didn't have to wait long for my baptism by fire. Mere weeks after our graduation, a kill order came down from on high, and I was assigned my first mission as a full-fledged Vindicare assassin. The briefing was terse and to the point, as all my briefings would be. Target: Colonel Zoran Vils, a renegade officer of the Astra Militarum who had seized control of an armory outpost on the Forge world Helios Beta. Vils and a cadre of traitor guardsmen were threatening to turn the planet's defense lasers on loyalist forces and had openly defied Imperial authority. My orders: eliminate Colonel Vils with extreme prejudice, decapitate the rebellion, and do it before his mutiny forced a costly full-scale assault. I traveled to Helios Beta aboard a Mechanicus freighter, hidden among the countless pilgrims and adepts flowing to that industrial world. Slipping planetside, I made my way through the smog-choked Manufactorum districts to reach the contested zone. It was a war-torn landscape of towering Factorum stacks and trench lines carved between mountains of scrap. Vils's rebels had fortified a central Manufactorum complex, turning it into a makeshift citadel. For 2 days, I scouted the area, observing patrol patterns, identifying vantage points. I eventually nestled into the upper works of a half-ruined coolant tower, nearly a kilometer from the rebel headquarters. From there, through a jagged crack in the tower shell, I had a clear line of sight to the Manufactorum's central forecourt. It was there that Vils regularly emerged to address his men and conduct public executions of those who refused to join his cause. The waiting felt different this time. No instructor watching over me, no simulation. This was real. But to my mild surprise, I found myself calm, focused. All the years of training clicked into place like the components of my rifle. I became a living statue in that coolant tower, blending with the rusted girders and ash, a spirit of vengeance unseen among the ruin. On the third day, my patience was rewarded. Colonel Vils strutted out into the open atop an old cargo platform, surrounded by his closest henchmen. Even at this distance, with my spy mask's magnification, I could see him clearly. A burly man in a tattered officer's coat, gesticulating wildly as he harangued a crowd of rebel troopers. Perhaps he was rallying them for an attack, or maybe just feeding his ego. It didn't matter. He had presented himself as expected. I quietly slowed my breathing, the familiar ritual bringing my heart to a crawl. Through the scope, I overlaid crosshairs on Vils's broad chest. Wind speed, negligible in the still factory air. Distance, 912 meters. I thumbed a selector rune on the side of the Exitus rifle, loading a single armor-piercing round, blessed by the temple's artificers. "Emperor, guide my aim." Vils raised his arm, likely shouting some defiant proclamation. It was the last gesture of his life. I exhaled halfway and gently squeezed the trigger, as I had done 10,000 times in training. The rifle kicked against my shoulder, a contained righteous fury, and a moment later, Colonel Vils's chest exploded in a fine red mist. Even before the echo of my rifle shot reached the unsuspecting rebels, Vils was down, a gaping hole where his heart and a chunk of his spine used to be. The Exitus round punched clean through him and into the Ogren bodyguard standing behind, dropping that brute as well. 2 kills, 1 bullet. For a heartbeat, the rebels froze, stunned by the sudden, inexplicable death of their leader. Panic and confusion followed. I watched through the scope as traitor guardsmen scrambled for cover, shouting in terror about a sniper. But they had no idea where I was. In the chaos, I saw some even turning on each other as paranoia took hold, each accusing the other of being an Imperial infiltrator. The corner of my mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Vils's rebellion was crumbling exactly as planned. I did not stay to witness the end. Even as the enemy's cohesion shattered, I was already dismantling my weapon with practiced speed. Within minutes of the shot, I had slipped away from my perch, leaving behind only a single shell casing cooling on the floor, a tiny memento of the Emperor's justice. Evading the panicked patrols was almost effortless amid the mayhem. I moved through shadowed alleys and utility tunnels, avoiding any direct confrontation. My sin-skin suit and camellia-lined cloak rendered me nearly invisible amid the smoke and debris. By the time loyalist Imperial Guard forces launched their assault on the rebel position later that day, I was long gone. Mission accomplished. The colonel's death had done its work. Lacking leadership, many rebels surrendered or fled at the first show of force. I exfiltrated off-world via a prearranged pickup by an anonymous merchant vessel. Once safely in the void, I transmitted a coded phrase back to Terra. Objective concluded. There was no fanfare, no congratulations. A successful assassination is often met with silence. The target's absence from the galactic stage is the only acknowledgement needed. Still, I recall a brief moment aboard that ship, alone in a darkened cargo hold, when I allowed myself a deep breath and a realization. I had done it. All the training, all the conditioning, and when the moment came, I executed my duty exactly as I was made to do. If I felt any lingering doubt about myself, It died with Colonel Vills on that Manufactorum platform. In the following years, one mission bled into the next. I became a razor-sharp asset in the Officio Assassinorum's arsenal, dispatched to extinguish threats across the length and breadth of the Imperium. Some assignments were as straightforward as my first, single shots in distant battle zones that turned the tide in the Imperium's favor. Others were far more complex, requiring months of undercover work or split-second adaptations to changing circumstances. I stalked gang lords in the nighted spires of hive cities, putting them down with silent shots from the dark so their criminal empires would collapse before they could destabilize entire regions. I spent weeks embedded on frontier worlds at the edge of Tau space, disguised as a mercenary, just to get close enough to kill a planetary governor who was flirting with the idea of siding with the Xenos. A lasbolt through his skull at a diplomatic dinner ensured that sedition died a-borning. I have ended the lives of corrupted nobles, heretic prophets, chaos warlords, and alien infiltrators. Each kill a strand cut from the tapestry of Imperial destiny, trimming away the threads that didn't belong. There were highlights, or lowlights, depending on one's view. I remember taking out Cardinal Otranto, an apostate cleric who had been stirring an entire subsector to rebellion. He stood atop a balcony addressing a frenzied mob when my bullet took him between the eyes mid-sentence. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps of awe and confusion. Many thought it the Emperor's lightning bolt striking him down for blasphemy. In a way, they were right. I was the Emperor's bolt that day. On another occasion, I eliminated war boss Urgak, the Unstoppable, an orc warlord whose Wa was on the verge of overrunning the desert moon of Janus. Crawling on my belly through red sand for 3 days and nights, I inched into position amidst the rocks overlooking the orc horde's camp. Urgak was a massive brute, bristling with crude cybernetic enhancements and boasting that no weapon could kill him. I proved him wrong with a single carefully placed turbo penetrator round through his bionic eye. The round punched through his reinforced skull. The great war boss toppled like a felled grox. In the ensuing confusion, the orc horde fell into squabbling and disarray without their leader, and the Imperial Guard mopped them up with relative ease. I still carry a scar on my left shoulder from that mission, a reminder that even as I slunk away, one of Urgak's snipers managed a lucky shot that grazed me. It nearly severed my arm, but my sinskin and augments saved me from worse. I treated the wound, bit down on the pain, and was off-world before the greenskins realized they'd been hit by nothing but ghosts. I recall a particularly harrowing mission on Orphean Treen, where the Xenos of craft world Biel-Tan launched a full-scale invasion. Their so-called Sword Wind had already razed 2 hive cities, and the Imperial defenders, bolstered by a detachment of Dark Angel's Space Marines, were making a last stand around the third and final city. The Eldar forces were led by a regal autarch in elaborate war armor, his leadership seemingly clairvoyant and unassailable. I was dispatched as the slimmest of hopes to tip the scales. For 7 days, I lay concealed within the ruined spires beyond the city's outskirts, watching the Eldar host draw ever closer. I had to crawl to a new hide whenever their farseers sent probing witch sight in my direction, remaining constantly on the move to avoid detection by their preternatural senses. Eventually, during the climactic assault, the autarch exposed himself atop a wrecked Lehman Rossi tank, rallying his troops for the final push. The opportunity was razor-thin. He was distant, agile, and warded by the psychic warnings of his seers. Yet, in that perfect instant, the chaos of battle and the Emperor's grace aligned. I took the shot. My bullet caught the autarch just beneath the throat, shattering the glowing soul stone embedded in his chest. The Xenos warlord collapsed, his lifeblood mingling with the dust of countless human victims. In the stunned lull that followed, the Eldar advance faltered. Their mystical courage broken with the death of their leader, the aliens retreated as our forces counterattacked. A single pull of the trigger had saved that last city from annihilation. Later, in their victory rites, the surviving guardsmen and Astar never learned exactly why the Eldar's assault suddenly ceased at the critical moment. But I knew it was one of those rare occasions I permitted myself a hint of pride. One life taken, a million lives spared. The math of assassination sometimes comes out merciful. Not every mission was solitary either. Once, in a rare and hush-hush operation, I found myself part of an execution force, an elite kill team comprised of one assassin from each major temple. The High Lords reserved such extreme measures for only the direst of targets. In this case, a Chaos Space Marine sorcerer had been amassing power in the ruins of an old orbital station, threatening to unleash a catastrophic warp manifestation. It was in the late years of M41 when I received those unprecedented orders. The threat was dire enough that the call went out to all temples. A Chaos Sorcerer Lord of the Crimson Slaughter, a heretic Astar named Severin Drask, had discovered an ancient warp artifact on the orbital station Karen's Fall above Achilles Prime. He was on the verge of harnessing it to rip open a massive warp rift, a catastrophe that would consume the entire planet below, and likely much of the system. With time and options short, 4 of us were dispatched to eliminate him and stop the ritual at all costs. I remember the quiet tension as our kill team assembled aboard an Inquisition black ship, translating into the system. We came from different temples, united only by the mission. Introductions were terse and by code designation only. True names had no place here. I was simply Vindicare. The others nodded in acknowledgement. Kalidus, a lathe figure in a hooded sinskin bodysuit, her features nondescript, likely already altered by polymorphine in preparation for infiltration. Culexis, a gaunt, utterly hairless man whose very presence made my skin crawl, the pariah gene in him projecting a null aura that set one's teeth on edge. And Eversor, a towering, muscle-bound silhouette pacing in the corner with restless energy, the cocktail of combat drugs in his bloodstream barely restrained by neurosuppressants until the time came to unleash him. He wore a skull-visaged helm, and through its vox grill emanated a faint, rapid panting like an excited hound scenting blood. We briefed quickly while en route. The station was swarming with the sorcerer's devoted followers, traitor guardsmen, cultists, and a cadre of his own Chaos Space Marines. A frontal assault was impossible even for 4 assassins, so subtlety and timing would be paramount. The Calidus had already prepared by assuming the visage of one of the sorcerer's lieutenants, a human cult magus who had been silently abducted and disposed of weeks prior. It was a masterful disguise. Even we who knew could barely tell the difference as she shifted facial structure and voice with ease. She would be our ticket inside. We inserted via a stolen supply shuttle with the Calidus in her magus persona at the fore. The rest of us hid within life suspension caskets, posing as expected offerings for the ritual. It was a tight fit, and the Eversor kept twitching in anticipation. Or perhaps it was withdrawal pains. His system was already priming him for the imminent violence. I recall whispering over comms for him to be still, as even a slight movement could tip off the station's sensors. A low growl was the only reply, but he complied. The ruse worked. Disguised as cultists transporting sacrifices, we were granted docking access. I could hear through my casket the harsh bark of station guards greeting Magus Velia, the Calidus in character, and her cool, imperious response. Moments later, we were being wheeled through echoing corridors of the space station. At a prearranged signal, a burst of binary cant in our comm beads, we sprang the trap. I kicked open my casket lid and emerged into a wide antechamber lit by guttering red luminators. Two traitor guards stood nearby. They managed only a moment of astonishment before I put a pair of knife-edged throwing stars into their throats. Across the chamber, the Eversor exploded out of his own container with a blood-curdling, electronically amplified scream, immediately pouncing on a third guard and tearing him limb from limb with his clawed gauntlets. The Calidus shed her disguise in a blur, drawing a phase blade from within her false robes and decapitating a Chaos Priest before he could summon a single daimonic ward. The Culexus simply stepped out of his coffin and strode forward with blank, lifeless eyes, his mere proximity causing the lone psyker among the welcoming party to shriek and collapse, blood trickling from his nose as the null field unbound his soul from reality. With our entry secured and no alarm yet raised, the slaughter had been lightning fast and contained, we proceeded deeper into the station. Over the comm, the Calidus adopted the dead Magus's voice to allay any suspicion for any who might inquire. Meanwhile, the Eversor was shaking with barely contained bloodlust. I often had to hiss at him to hold position as we navigated shadowed maintenance corridors toward the sorcerer's ritual chamber. His stimulant-laced biology was urging him to charge headlong. Patience was not in his nature. Only the direct order from our inquisitorial handler, crackling in his cranial implant, kept him in check. Not yet. Wait. We passed grisly scenes. Flayed corpses hung as blasphemous warding sigils, piles of human ash and melted candles forming profane symbols on the deck. The sorcerer's work was already warping reality here. The air felt thick and greasy with warp residue. The Culexus seemed to relish it. He marched in front, his mere presence pushing back the Imperium's touch like oil repelled from water. Behind him, I moved in near silence, Exitus rifle at the ready, searching for any vantage we could exploit. Finally, we reached an observation gantry overlooking the central chamber, a vast cathedral-like manufactorum bay at the station's core. Below us, hundreds of chanting cultists surrounded a raised dais inscribed with glowing runes. Atop it stood the Chaos Sorcerer himself, Severin Drask, clad in Baroque power armor adorned with pulsating eldritch sigils. Even from this distance, through my scope I could see his eyes burning with an unnatural light as he recited an incantation in a language that made the soul ache to hear. Arrayed around him were 4 Chaos Space Marines in crimson and brass, each holding a chain-bound psyker whose agonized, thrashing attempts to resist were amplifying the ritual's power. A vortex of seething purple-black energy coiled above the dais, the beginnings of the warp rift. This was it. We would likely have only one chance. My task was clear. The sorcerer's head was mine to claim, but first we needed to create an opening. Via hand gestures and a few curt whispers, we coordinated our plan. The Calitiatus would use a disruption device, a specialized Tanglefoot grenade, to entangle and delay the Chaos Marines the moment we struck. The Eversor, well, his role was straightforward: cause utter mayhem. The Culexus would target the Psykers and try to collapse the energy of the ritual, all pieces in motion, depending on my opening shot to remove the linchpin. Drask. I steadied my rifle on the gantry railing, dialing the scope's runic sight for the sorcerer's horned helm. Windage, none. Artificial gravity was steady. Range, about 400 meters. Target, heavily armored, likely shielded by foul sorcery. I loaded a specialized round the temple had provided for this mission, a shield breaker bullet designed to penetrate force fields and disrupt psychic wards. Below, the ritual neared its crescendo. the howling of warp winds rising, cultists levitating as gravity fluctuated. My eye stayed fixed on Drask. I synced our strike by voxing a single click over the comm. In an instant, action erupted. I squeezed the trigger, and my Exitus rifle spoke a single thunderous word, the shield breaker round, streaking out trailing contrails of blue. Simultaneously, the Calidus hurled the Tanglefoot grenade into the midst of the Chaos Marines. It detonated with a crackling snap, sending arcing filaments of electrostatic webbing around their legs. The Eversor, unable to restrain himself a second longer, leapt from the gantry in a howling dive, a living projectile descending into the startled masses below, with chainsword revved and dripping poison. And the Culexus. He stepped forward beside me and opened the black, gaping maw of his Animus Speculum, a device like a brazen lantern atop his helmet, unleashing a cone of absolute emptiness toward the ritual below. My bullet met Drask just as his eyes snapped open in alarm. The shield breaker did its work, a brief flash of flickering energy as his personal kind shield collapsed. A heartbeat later, the round punched clean through his chest. For an instant, Drask remained standing, his hands frozen mid-gesture as the warp vortex overhead sputtered chaotically. Then the top half of his torso simply ceased to exist, pulverized by the round's impact. His legs toppled one way, his upper body, what remained of it, fell another, and the ritual immediately spiraled out of control. The effect on the chamber was dramatic. The cultists' chant dissolved into screams. The partly formed warp rift above the dais shrieked and imploded, sending shockwaves of unreality washing over the hall. Many cultists dropped to their knees, clawing at their eyes or convulsing as their fragile minds snapped. One of the Chaos Marines was caught in the tangling web of the Calidus's grenade. His movements slowed enough that the Eversor was on him in an instant, chainblade ripping through ceramite and flesh like parchment. Another traitor Marine turned to face this new threat, only to have his skull caved in by a pinpoint shot from my rifle, 2 quick rounds through the eye lenses. The remaining 2 opened fire wildly. One sprayed bolter shells toward the gantry. I ducked back as rounds sparked off metal around us. The other leveled his combi bolter at the Culexus in the gallery above. But that Marine faltered as his captive psyker suddenly exploded in a fountain of gore, the backlash of the null field having boiled the wretch's brain. Freed from their handlers, the other tormented psykers unleashed uncontrolled bursts of lightning and flame, adding to the bedlam. It was time to go. The primary target was down and the ritual disrupted, but we were deep in the belly of the beast, and things were about to get very hot. Objective down, exfil, exfil, I voxed, my voice amazingly calm amid the carnage. Across the chamber, the Calidus already melted away into the panicked crowd of cultists, her shape-shifted form likely slipping out in the confusion. The Culexus gave one final pulse of his null aura toward the remaining enemy, sending dozens of cult lackeys into unconscious terror. Then he too began to retreat down a side gantry, face impassive as ever. The Eversor, on the other hand, was in full frenzy. He had clambered atop the sorcerer's shattered dais, screeching profane or sacred war cries and firing his executioner pistol akimbo into the fleeing cult horde. His blood-red displacer eye lenses caught my gaze for an instant, and I saw nothing human there, just a caged animal completely off its leash. "Eversor, fall back!" I snarled into the comm, though I doubted he was in any state to listen. The station's alarm klaxons had begun to blare, accompanied by the bass rumble of secondary explosions. Our sabotage, or perhaps the sorcerer's final curse, tearing the place apart. I reloaded and provided cover fire, picking off a traitor Marine who was trying to drag himself, missing both legs, toward a fallen bolter. The Eversor finally seemed to get the message, Or perhaps the surging adrenaline in his system finally drove him to seek new prey. With an almost disappointed growl, he bounded away from the dais, leaving a trail of butchered corpses in his wake, and began sprinting back toward our insertion route. I didn't wait for him to catch up. I turned and ran, ghosting through the corridors we'd come by. Behind me, I could hear the pounding footfalls of the Eversor approaching, interspersed with manic, stuttering laughter and babbled litanies of rage. The Black Ship's extraction shuttle was already inbound. We had planned for a quick exit, or not at all. We regrouped at the dock in ones and twos. I was first into the pilot bay. Vindicares run when they need to, quickly overriding the hangar's locking mechanisms. The Calidus was already there. She emerged from the shadows with a few bloody new scratches but otherwise intact, nodding curtly at me. The Culexus arrived moments after, seemingly unperturbed by the chaos, though his null aura was flickering erratically, perhaps sated on the psychic feast it had consumed. The Eversor was last, naturally, barreling through a closing bulkhead just as we were sealing the shuttle's hatch. He was spattered in blood from head to toe, much of it his own where bolter fragments had punched into him, though in his heightened state he seemed not to notice or care. No sooner had the shuttle detached and pulled away from the station than the entire orbital platform was consumed in a chain of brilliant explosions. The sorcerer must have rigged it to self-destruct if his plan failed. A final spiteful act. We watched from the shuttle's viewports as Charon's fall station split apart, molten metal and flaming debris blooming in the void. If we'd tarried a minute longer, we'd have been vaporized along with it. Thus ended that mission, a complete success by our reckoning. Severin Drask was dead and his nascent warp rift snuffed out. The cost? The station, a small price, a few dozen Imperial prisoners, tragic but acceptable in context, and perhaps a sliver of our sanity, some more than others. Back aboard the Black Ship, our team disbanded as unceremoniously as it had formed. I won't pretend we 4 assassins shared any camaraderie in victory. We were too different, each already mentally preparing for extraction and debriefing, likely never to see one another again. But there was a grim satisfaction among us. We had achieved together what none of us could have alone. The Eversor, still high on combat stims and raw adrenaline, actually came stomping over to me in the hangar bay after we docked, cackling through his helmet speakers. Before I knew it, he clapped a clawed gauntlet on my shoulder in a gesture that might have been congratulatory, or maybe he was just steadying himself. "Good shot," he rasped, voice distorted and wild. Then, in an almost comical motion, he raised his hand as if expecting me to return a high five. I simply stared at him, my mask thankfully hiding my incredulous expression, and gave a slight nod. I left him hanging. I wasn't at all sure that if I reciprocated, he wouldn't tear my arm off in exuberance. He threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, unhinged sound, then lumbered away, presumably seeking the medics or a stasis pod before his chems burned out and his body went into shock. Working with those assassins had been enlightening, and it reminded me why we normally operate alone. The mission succeeded brilliantly, yes, but the margin for chaos, even among ourselves, had been great. After our debrief, I was quietly commended for my marksmanship and then left to resume my solitary existence. I was glad to return to the quiet shadows. The execution force taught me that even the most dire enemy schemes can be undone by a single, well-placed strike, or in that case, 4 well-placed strikes in concert. It was proof that the Assassinorum, when united, can achieve the impossible. But given the choice, I would prefer not to test that kind of teamwork again. Solo is simpler. Through all these assignments, years stretched into decades. Time becomes strange when you spend it hopping from war zone to war zone. I often traveled in cryosuspension or aboard warp ships where months or years outside equated to mere weeks of subjective time for me. I've probably outlived any contemporaries from my Schola days by now, though I still appear a man in his prime. Such is the nature of our work. We drift on the eddies of the Imperium's endless wars, surfacing only to deal death, and then receding into anonymity once more. I grew accustomed to the solitude, to being a blade in the dark only drawn when needed. Between missions, I would either train further in a hidden temple safehouse or enter a kind of cold storage, sleeping away the transit time to the next deployment. We assassins are not meant to have lives outside of killing. We are kept like well-honed knives, carefully sheathed until required. My existence became a sequence of targets and trigger pulls, punctuated by prayer and maintenance. If I ever questioned the morality of what I did, I buried those questions deep. My targets were, by every scrap of intelligence given, enemies of the Imperium. Traitors, heretics, Xenos filth. Removing them was an unquestionable good in service to humanity's survival. And if now and then I felt a pang of something, not quite guilt, but perhaps a hollow recognition of the humanity in the people I dispatched, I smothered it beneath layers of indoctrinated purpose. Hesitation is death. Doubt is a poison to the will. I could not afford either. So why is it that here and now, on this rain-slick spire under a bruised sky, I feel a strange unease? It's faint, like a static at the edge of my hearing, but it's there. Perhaps it's the nature of this current mission, different from the others in subtle ways. My target, Governor Callistus, is an Imperial official, a man ostensibly on our side, at least until his alleged treachery. I have slain wayward governors before, but usually they were clearly in open rebellion. Callistus's sin, according to my briefing, is more nuanced. Secret dealings, planned betrayal. And then there's the presence of Inquisitor Tavik, the architect of this operation, hovering behind the scenes. Typically, I operate with minimal oversight. A message comes from the highest authorities. Kill this person. And I execute, literally and figuratively. Rarely does an Inquisitor personally involve themselves beyond perhaps supplying intelligence. But Inquisitor Orlan Tavik of the Ordo Hereticus made a point of meeting me when I arrived on this planet. He provided extensive briefings, evidence files, passionate exhortations about the governor's perfidy. Tavik practically radiated zeal. He seemed as eager to see Callistus dead as any cultist would be, to see a saint fall. I dismissed it as the quirk of a true believer at the time. Some inquisitors are fervent to the point of mania, and Tavik struck me as one of that breed, eyes alight with righteous fury. Still, in hindsight, his intensity was notable. He insisted I strike during this very speech the governor is about to give, claiming that letting Callistus speak at all risked him declaring independence and causing a system-wide revolt. Timing was critical, Tavik stressed. The assassination had to be public enough to make an example of the traitor, but it must appear clean, the single bullet from nowhere, fear of the Emperor made manifest. I was to leave the investigators no clue beyond a corpse and no obvious trail. All standard enough, really. Yet here in the final moments, a small voice in the back of my mind wonders, why did the Inquisitor seem almost excited for this? Most I've met are grim or businesslike about necessary evils. Tavik, though, handed me Callistus's death sentence with a zeal that rivaled a fanatic handing out redemption. It gave me pause. But these musings are cut short. My scope detects movement at last on the balcony of the governor's palace adjacent to the cathedral. The time is upon me. The crowd below grows restless under the rain as dignitaries take their places. I see a cluster of robed attendants and armed guards emerging. Among them, stepping up to the grand lectern draped in Aquila banners, is Governor Callistus himself, the man I've traveled across the stars to kill. Whatever stray doubts were buzzing in my skull fall silent now. In this moment, there is only the mission, the target. I shift slightly, bringing my rifle to bear, adjusting the magnification to get a closer look. Callistus is a tall, austere man in a ceremonial greatcoat. Through my scope, I can even make out the lines of worry on his face as he surveys the crowd. He does not look like a raving heretic about to spout sedition. He looks tired, sad even. I push the thought aside, looks mean nothing. The data slate of evidence Tavik gave me claimed Callistus had been selling Imperial secrets to unknown contacts and plotting to renounce the Imperium's protection. If that is true, his weariness is likely guilt or fear. If it is false, well, that's not for me to determine, I remind myself. We do not determine the guilty or the innocent. We are but the cold instruments of the Emperor's vengeance. That is the Assassinorum creed. The thought steadies me. I line up the shot, centering on the governor's broad chest, a sure kill even if he's wearing body armor beneath that coat. My index finger slides onto the trigger and begins to take up the slack. The crowd falls silent as Governor Callistus raises his hands, preparing to speak. This is it. I begin a slow exhale. My heartbeat is steady, the reticle barely wavering on its mark. So many years, so many kills, and at the crucial moment it always comes to this. Me, the target, and the Emperor's will. Boom! The Exitus rifle speaks a single thunderous word, drowning out even the roll of distant thunder. Governor Callistus jerks violently as the impact smashes into him. My crosshairs bloom with a burst of crimson. The exit wound sprays the lectern with gore. A heartbeat later, the sound of the shot reaches the plaza, and the assembled crowd erupts in screams. Through my scope, I see Callistus's eyes go wide in shock and pain. He staggers, a neat round hole punched through his chest where my bullet penetrated cleanly. For an instant, he stays on his feet, perhaps on sheer will. His lips move soundlessly. Then the light goes out in his eyes, and the governor of Arcadia 7 collapses to the marble floor of the balcony, dead before he hits the ground. Pandemonium. Below, citizens shriek and scatter. Some duck for cover, others simply freeze in terror. On the balcony, guards rush to their fallen lord, shouting orders I can't hear over the wail of alarms now sounding. I already know they won't find the shooter. I'm a kilometer away, invisible and silent once more, my rifle already disassembled and stowed in its weatherproof case. The rain picks up again, as if the heavens themselves weep at the sudden violent turn of events. I remain prone a few moments longer, observing the chaos through my mask's enhanced vision. Callistus's chief adjutant appears at the railing, gesturing frantically for the guards to secure the area. I catch a glimpse of another figure behind the panicked officials, Inquisitor Tavik, stepping out of the shadows with theatrical timing, feigning horror at the scene. Even at this distance, I see the slight smile curling at the edge of Tavievik's mouth before he wipes it away and assumes a mask of righteous fury, barking commands. Something about that image gnaws at me. The Inquisitor, the very man who insisted on this assassination, now playing the bereaved ally. It fits the expected script, yes. He'll no doubt take charge, investigating the tragic death, spinning it as he needs. But it's that smile, that flicker of satisfaction on Tavik's face when he looked upon the governor's corpse. In that moment, my uneasy feeling crystallizes into certainty. I was not an instrument of justice today. I was a weapon wielded for someone's personal agenda. My jaw tightens. I pull away from the scope and quietly slither back from the edge of the bell tower roof that has been my nest. I need to move. Standard exfiltration protocol demands I vacate and fade away amidst the confusion. But part of me, a part that has grown louder in the last few minutes, refuses to leave it at that. As I descend the narrow spiral staircase inside the tower, I tune my spy mask's vox into the local RB-TES and PDF channels, listening in on the response. Snatches of conversation spill into my ear. Confirmed. The governor is down. Repeat. Governor down. Unknown shooter, likely sniper. Lock down the palace. Get forensic servitors scanning for ballistics. Inquisitor Tavik is assuming command! All units stand by for his orders! I grit my teeth at that last part. Assuming command, is he? Convenient. Switching frequencies, I catch what sounds like Tavik's own voice on a private channel. My mask's auto-savant spirit barely manages to latch onto the signal, likely a short-range microbead. Phase 1 is complete. Tavik's voice crackles softly. Yes, no, he suspects nothing. The idiot probably thinks he saved the Imperium today. A pause. Proceed with the next step. Secure his research labs and make sure any evidence linking back to me is purged. We'll pin this entire mess on the good governor's heresy and perhaps a Xenos assassin, yes. Of course. Report back when it's done. My blood, usually ice in my veins during a mission, begins to simmer. The words are damning. Tavik is tying up loose ends, covering his tracks, and clearly considers me one such loose end, given his tone. There's contempt in his voice when he spoke of the idiot who thinks he saved the Imperium. He can only mean one person, the pawn who pulled the trigger. Me. My grip tightens on the case of my rifle. I breathe slowly, forcing down the surge of emotion. Anger is a weapon, I remind myself, but only if controlled. Another mantra from training whispers up. We are the bullet that awaits the heretic's skull. In this instance, the heretic appears to have been giving me orders. When I reach the base of the tower, I slip out through a side door into a deserted cloister. The cathedral's bells are tolling an alarm now, adding to the cacophony. People rush through the far end of the plaza, seeking shelter or authority, or both. None notice the rain-soaked figure in a featureless black body glove ghosting through the arcade shadows. I have a decision to make. The mission as assigned is over. I could vanish right now, reach my extraction point, and be gone. Let the local authorities and Tavik sort out the aftermath. That is what I was conditioned to do. Complete the assignment and move on. No questions asked. But everything about this feels wrong. If I leave now, an innocent man's blood, no, I must correct that, an apparently innocent man's blood, is on my hands, spilled to advance the schemes of a corrupt inquisitor. And beyond even that personal weight, leaving would mean letting Tavik succeed in whatever he's plotting. The Officio Assassinorum did not raise me to be a judge, but they did raise me to be the Emperor's weapon against the enemies of mankind. And right now, Inquisitor Tavik is looking a lot like an enemy of mankind. I set my jaw. I will not run from this. Not yet. First, I need a better vantage and more intel. Tavik will undoubtedly have contingencies. He's already executing them. If he intends to eliminate evidence, he'll have assets moving to destroy files or witnesses. And he likely intends to eliminate me if he can find me. The hunters may already be on their way. As if on cue, a new sound cuts through the rain, the angry whine of a chain blade revving up, followed by heavy footfalls splashing in puddles. From around a corner of the cloister, 3 armored figures appear, moving in tactical formation. RB-TES? No. The RB-TES wouldn't be using chain weapons for a sniper hunt. These are likely Tavik's private thugs. They haven't seen me yet. I press myself behind a pillar and observe. They're wearing mismatched gear, mercenaries by the look of it, or perhaps hive-gangers given a quick mercenary makeover. One carries a roaring chain axe, another a heavy stubber, and the third sweeps an Auspex scanner side to side. They're speaking low Gothic, clipped. Scanner's got nothing yet. He might have moved to the rooftops. Keep looking. Tavik said he'd likely be heading this way to Exfil. We find him, we kill him, take the body. Inquisitor's orders. No witnesses, understand? A cold clarity settles over me. There it is, plain and clear. Tavik sent a kill team after me. Perhaps he guessed I might linger, or maybe he's eliminating any possible trace of Officio involvement by simply silencing its agent. Either way, these three are between me and my next moves. I slip my Exitus pistol from its holster under my arm. The merc with the Auspex is only a few meters from me now, eyes on his device, oblivious to the danger creeping behind the stone column. The other two fan out slightly, scanning the arcades. In a single smooth motion, I step from cover and fire twice. The pistol's report is a flat crack-crack, swallowed by the rain and bell noise. The first shot catches the scanner wielder in the temple. The heavy-caliber bullet doesn't exit. It ricochets inside his skull, doing its grisly work. He drops like a marionette with its strings cut. Before the others register what happened, my second shot takes the heavy stubber gunner in the throat, punching through his gorget. He collapses, gurgling and clutching his neck as dark blood spills between his fingers. The chain axe brute roars in surprise and rage. To his credit, he doesn't flee. Instead, he charges straight at me, axe raised. Bold but foolish. I could gun him down easily, but a flicker of feral glee in me decides otherwise. He's big, augmetic arms perhaps, hissing with hydraulics as they power the axe. But he's slow. I sidestep his clumsy downward swing. The chain teeth screech against the stone floor where I stood a heartbeat ago. Using his momentum, I drive an elbow into the side of his knee as he passes, cracking it. He howls and stumbles forward. I follow up by slamming the butt of my pistol against the back of his skull, aiming for the neural link port common in mercenaries with combat stim implants. A crunch and he goes down on one knee. The axe slips from his grasp. Before he can recover, I place the pistol's muzzle against the base of his skull. "Inquisitor's orders?" I hiss quietly, completing the thought he shared moments ago. Then I pull the trigger. A fine pink mist and splinter of bone spray out from his visor slit, and he flops face first into a growing puddle. It's over in seconds. 3 more dead by my hand, this time without any doubt they deserved it. They were coming to kill me at the behest of a traitor. That's self-defense, or at least as close to it as an assassin ever gets. I quickly drag their bodies into the deep shadows of an alcove out of casual sight. Stripping a glance at one's gear, I spot a comm bead blinking on his collar. I lift it to my ear in time to catch a voice. "Team Theta, report. Have you secured the asset's body? Report, damn you." I recognize the barking voice. One of Tavik's senior acolytes, a scarred man who had trailed him earlier. I don't bother imitating a response. I simply crush the bead under my heel. No doubt that will alarm them, but at this stage, subtlety is a dwindling option. Time to find Tavik. I consider my options. Tavik was on the balcony moments after the shot, so he's likely still at the palace or close by. Perhaps he'll retreat somewhere defensible now that his deed is done. If I were him, I might head to the governor's own secure chambers or a communications center to seize control. He may have more mercenaries or corrupt PDF at his beck and call now. Even a rogue inquisitor can wield considerable authority for a short time by bluff and bluster. However, Tavik doesn't know his kill team failed yet, nor that I overheard his communication. That gives me a slim advantage. Surprise is on my side for the moment. Moving quickly through the maze of alleys, I loop toward the governor's palace. The rain has intensified into a downpour, and night is fully fallen, giving me ample cover. The city is in turmoil. Arbites sirens wail, Adeptus. Arbites riot. Suppression units are deploying to control the panicked crowds, and I see enforcer patrols rushing about. I scale a drainage pipe up to a second-story ledge, then jump and climb my way onto the roof of an administratum archive building, affording me a clear line of sight to the palace entrance. A contingent of Arbites and palace guards stands there, weapons ready, blocking any approach. Tavik likely doesn't expect me to stroll in the front door, but it confirms he's still inside. They wouldn't guard a corpse of the governor like this unless a high authority, the Inquisitor, told them to lock everything down. I need an ingress. I scan upward along the tall facade of the palace. Ornamental Gothic architecture, spires, stained glass windows, balconies. My mask highlights a possible route, an old maintenance scaffold tucked behind a massive statue of Saint Drusus on the palace's side. From the roof I'm on, I can leap to a flying buttress of the neighboring basilica, and from there, onto that scaffold. I holster my pistol and take a running start. With augmented strength and a burst of adrenaline, I vault across the gap between buildings. My hands catch the slick stone of the buttress. I pull myself up with quiet grunts of effort. The wound on my shoulder from the orc sniper years ago twinges. Focus. Once balanced, I leap again, landing cat-like on the scaffolding. It rattles, but the storm covers any minor noise. Climbing up 2 levels, I pause on the swaying platform, and a faint whirring noise gives me pause. Peering through the gloom, I spot a servo skull drifting along the palace eaves, an automated sentry with brass eye lenses scanning for intruders. Its cogitator emits a gentle hum as it sweeps a searchlight beam methodically over the upper walls. I press myself flat against the scaffolding planks, holding my breath. The skull floats closer, its auspex sensors likely tuned for movement or heat signatures. Inch by inch, I slide behind the stone bulk of the St. Drusus statue, using it as cover. The servo skull's light passes overhead, lingering for a tense moment on the very spot I hung from moments before. A bead of sweat trickles down my neck under the sin-skin. I will myself to remain utterly still. A gargoyle among gargoyles. After a long moment, the skull finds nothing and continues on its patrol route, gliding past and disappearing around a spire. Only then do I dare to move again. I silently let out the breath I'd been holding. The minor machine spirit guardian nearly detected me, a rare close call. Doubtless Tavik had ordered additional surveillance around the palace. But a human can outwit a servitor with enough patience. I climb further up, coming alongside a narrow clerestory ventilation grate near the top of the wall. Gently, silently, I ease the grate open on its old hinges. No alarm, runes visible, likely a maintenance access not tied to the security grid. Good. I slip inside, boots touching down on a beam in the rafters of a side corridor. I'm in a side hallway of the palace, dimly lit and empty. The sounds of commotion echo from somewhere ahead. The main atrium, perhaps. Moving through shadow, I follow the corridor toward an intersection where light spills. I can hear Tavik's voice now, amplified and imperious. Taking control of this investigation under my authority. Until further notice, everyone is suspect. You take a squad and secure the astropathic choir. Nobody sends messages off-world without my approval. You lock down the spaceport. The assassin may try to flee the planet. I peer around a gilded pillar into the grand atrium of the governor's palace. It's a lavish hall, now bristling with armed personnel. A few are Arbites officers, looking uncertain and cowed. Others are local PDF captains, and in the center of them, on the steps beneath a huge marble aquila, stands Inquisitor Tavik. He's thrown off any pretense of subtlety now, clad in a black carapace breastplate, storm coat draped around him. He holds a position like a general seizing command. There's a hint of manic energy in his eyes as he snaps orders. He's in his element, a spider at the center of a self-spun web. My instincts prompt me to simply line up a shot and put him down from here. But too many witnesses, arbiters and guards loyal to their idea of Imperial authority. If I shoot Tavik in plain view, I'll have to battle my way out against all of them, who would only see an assassin turning on an Imperial official. They don't know what I know. No, I need to isolate him, or at least sow confusion. Tavik finishes barking directives. The Arbites and PDF personnel disperse hesitantly to carry them out, leaving just Tavik and two of his own acolytes in the hall. One is the scarred man from the calm, now looking concerned. The other is a woman with a cruel, thin face and a shock prod in hand. The man murmurs to Tavik, "Theta team's not responding, my lord. I fear the assassin." "Of course he's alive," Tavovik snarls, eyes blazing. "If they'd succeeded, they'd have reported." "No matter. He won't escape this world alive. And even if by some miracle he does, he has nothing. We scrubbed everything clean. We'll pin this on the governor's dealings with Xenos assassins, and I'll be hailed for surviving an attempt on my life while bringing a traitor to justice." He almost laughs, a sharp, humorless sound. Poetic, isn't it? The Assassinorum kills one of their own allies, and in doing so secures me more power. The female acolyte smiles thinly. "Truly, the Emperor works in mysterious ways." "Spare me," Tavik snorts, waving a hand. "The Emperor had nothing to do with this. This was all our handiwork, and profitable it shall be. Now," he sighs, "I must pen a missive to the High Lords about this tragedy. The right spin must be placed before anyone else can muddy it. Continue the sweep for our loose end, but quietly. No need to cause a panic among these rubes." He turns on his heel and strides toward a side door, likely the governor's private office or communications chamber. His two acolytes fall in step behind him, though the scarred male, Heston, Tavik called him earlier, hesitates, clearly uneasy about my absence. Tavik snaps at him. "Heston with me. The other teams will handle it. This is my chance." Before the trio disappears behind those ornate wooden doors, I slip from my cover and pad silently along the upper mezzanine that rings the atrium. I know where that side door leads. I passed the exterior of that office on my way in, one level up. If I recall correctly, there was a narrow clerestory window above it. I perch at one of these small grilled openings, listening. My mask's audio filters catch the voices inside. "Tavik, begin the Astropath dispatch. Use cipher sequence Aurelia 6, high priority. Mark the governor's death as martyrdom, killed by unknown assassins, possibly Eldar." Acolyte female. "At once, Inquisitor." I hear a Vox unit being keyed. Perhaps she's dictating to an Astropath scribe. Heston. "My lord, with respect, if the Vindicator survives and somehow communicates what really happened." Tavik, with a sneer I can almost hear. "To whom? The Assassinorum? They'll never admit to such a blunder publicly, and any internal complaint will die in bureaucratic limbo. Besides, we'll make sure he doesn't leave this planet. I've anticipated far more cunning foes than one indoctrinated killer. He won't disobey his conditioning to go rogue. At best, he'll try to report to his superiors, who will funnel any inquiry straight to allies of mine. No, I'm not concerned. By the time anyone pieces together even a fragment of this, I'll be entrenched as de facto ruler of Arcadia 7, and with Governor Callistus's extensive heresies laid bare, fabricated though they are, none will object to me cleansing a nest of traitors and taking charge. My stomach twists in disgust. The sheer arrogance, the treason cloaked in piety. Tavik is a walking embodiment of the Imperium's decay. I realize with cold clarity that this scenario is exactly what our instructors had warned of in historical anecdotes, a master of our order gone rotten. During the Wars of Vindication, entire sections of the Imperial Palace were destroyed in the battle to purge a corrupt Grand Master. Now, here I am, enacting a much smaller, but no less crucial purge on a single treacherous Inquisitor. History repeating itself in miniature, and I the unwilling agent of correction. I've heard enough. Gently, I ease the ventilation grate open and drop down into the room. It's a grand office, walls lined with shelves of scrolls and data slates, a massive desk at one end and a stained glass window, now shattered by panicked gunfire, behind it. Tavik stands near the desk, finishing his dictation into a Vox unit. His acolytes are nearby. The female is at a lectern with an Auspex tablet, the male by the door. I land in a crouch behind them, my footsteps masked by the drumming rain and distant alarms. But I don't remain hidden long. A Vindicar assassin isn't one for dramatic speeches from the shadows. I rise to my full height, Exitus pistol in hand, and address the Inquisitor directly. "Inquisitor Tavik," I say, voice low and cold, "your deceit has come to an end." All three whirl around, shock etched on their faces. Tavik's eyes bulge. "You," he sputters. Before anyone can react further, I aim and fire a single shot. The female acolyte's forehead blossoms red as she drops, dead before she can even gasp. I've removed the psyker, or communications officer, of the trio, and now only Tavik and his burly lapdog remain. Heston, to his credit, lunges forward, drawing a plasma pistol with impressive speed. His shot hisses past my ear, blowing apart a section of the stone vent behind me in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Plasma. A direct hit would be the end of me. I dive into a roll as he fires again, the superheated bolt scorching the air where my head had been a split second earlier. Tavik, meanwhile, scrambles behind the large oak desk, drawing what looks like a needler pistol from his coat. A coward's weapon, loaded with some exotic toxin, no doubt. He barks, "Kill him, Heston! Now!" The acolyte moves to block me, interposing himself between Tavik and me. He's well trained, covering his master's retreat. He fires twice more, forcing me to duck behind a marble column in the center of the room. Boiling plasma splashes across the pillar's surface, sending chips of stone flying. I feel a scalding fleck catch my cheek. It sizzles on my sinskin hood, thankfully not penetrating. We're at an impasse, Heston and I both behind cover, both armed. But I am a Vindicator. This is my arena. I activate my spy mask's predictive targeting assist. A soft whir as it calculates trajectories. The next time Heston's plasma pistol winds up with a rising whine, I roll out from cover and snap off a shot mid-roll. My Exitus round catches his plasma gun just as he pulls the trigger. There's a brilliant flash as the shot pierces the weapon's magnetic chamber, and it malfunctions catastrophically. Heston's arm disappears in a burst of light up to the shoulder, vaporized by his own weapon's destruction. He screams and collapses to his knees, staring in disbelief at the cauterized stump where his arm was. I am on him in a heartbeat, kicking away his remaining sidearm. He gawps up at me, sweat and rainwater mingling on his face, pain dulling his features. "Emperor's mercy," he whimpers. I grant him none. A quick pistol shot between the eyes silences Heston, sending his corpse slumping to the marble floor of the governor's office. Only Tavik remains. The Inquisitor is cornered behind the heavy desk, but as I turn toward him, a sudden searing agony explodes in my side. I stagger, looking down to see a thin needle protruding from my ribs, just between the armored plates of my sinskin. My vision swims, and for a moment my limbs feel leaden. Poison. Tavik must have popped up and fired his needler pistol while I was engaged with Heston. Cursing myself for the lapse, I drop to one knee. My body rebels. The toxin is a paralytic, I think, already spreading cold fire through my veins, trying to seize up my muscles. My enhanced physiology is counteracting it. My blood's chemical scrubbers already whir into overdrive. But I need time. I play up the weakness, letting my pistol hand droop as if I'm losing motor control. Tavik approaches from behind the desk, arrogance overriding caution. He clearly relishes this, a chance to gloat. He keeps the needler trained on me, but a sneer curls his lip. "You misguided wretch," he spits, eyes wild. "Did you really think you could turn on me, on the Imperium itself, and survive? You're nothing but a tool, and you've outlived your usefulness." Through my mask's visor, I lock eyes with him. Summoning every last thread of strength in my limbs, I tighten my grip on my pistol, still lowered at my side. The neurotoxin has my left arm numb, but my right, my shooting arm, thrums as my accelerated heart pumps counteragents and stimulants into it. Just a little closer. Tavik raises his needler pistol toward my head, hand steady. "Any last words, assassin? A prayer to your emperor, perhaps?" Through clenched teeth, I manage a rasping chuckle. "Just one thing," I say. "Exitus. Acta. Probat." He frowns, confused by the high Gothic phrase. The outcome justifies the deed. That second of distraction is all I need. With blinding speed, I snap my pistol up and fire. The shot catches Talvik in his right knee, shattering bone. He screams and collapses, his own pistol discharging a needle harmlessly into the ceiling as he falls. I surge to my feet, adrenaline and sheer will overriding the poison's grip. In 2 strides, I'm over him. Tavik tries to crawl away, dragging his ruined leg, anguish and terror on his face. I kick the needler pistol from his hand. It skitters across the floor. "Inquisitor Tavik," I say quietly, the sarcasm dripping from the title. "By authority of the Officio Assassinorum and in the Emperor's name, I judge you guilty of heresy, treason, and the murder of a loyal Imperial servant." He rolls onto his back, propping himself on his elbows amid the shattered data slates and smoldering papers from our firefight. Rain pours in through the broken window behind me, framing me as a dark silhouette above him. Tavik's composure is gone, replaced by raw animal fear. No, wait," he stammers. "You have no right. I'm an inquisitor. I serve—" "You serve only yourself," I reply, voice ice. "And you've betrayed the Imperium you claim to protect." He raises a hand as if to ward me off, eyes wide and pleading. In this moment, he's nothing, a petty schemer caught in his own web. No different than the rebel I killed when I was 8, begging in his final moments. For an instant, I recall that day, standing over a dying traitor, glass shard in hand, terrified and strangely calm. Then I look at Tavik, this loathsome creature squirming in a puddle. Funny, I've come full circle. I press the barrel of my Exitus pistol to Orlan Tavik's forehead, right between his panicked eyes. "May the Emperor judge your soul," I whisper. Then I pull the trigger. A single shot cracks. Tavik's head snaps back, a neat hole drilled through his skull. His body slumps against the marble floor of the governor's office, finally as lifeless as the man he had me kill hours before. Silence, save for the patter of rain through the shattered window and the distant turmoil outside. It's done. The traitor is dead, the strings of his conspiracy cut. I take a moment to steady myself against the desk. The poison's effects are receding. My enhanced metabolism and the stims I injected earlier are finally purging it. I yank the slim needle dart out from between my ribs and toss it aside in distaste. My gaze falls on Tavik's corpse. There is no triumph in me, only grim fulfillment. This wasn't a sanctioned kill. No High Lord approved this deed. In the eyes of some, I've just murdered an Imperial Inquisitor, one of our own, and that may not go over well. but I know the truth of it, and I have evidence. I quickly retrieved Tavik's personal data slate from inside his coat. It's still active, unlocked in his final moments to send that astropathic message. I canceled the transmission with a few quick taps. No false report will leave this world on his behalf. Next, I slip a tiny hololithic recording crystal from a pouch on my belt. It's been quietly recording via my mask since I entered the room. Everything Tavik said is on here, his admissions, his gloating, all of it. I spare a glance for the female acolyte's body. On her belt, several vials of antitoxin, likely for the same poison that hit me. I jab one into my thigh. Within seconds, the remaining numbness dissipates, strength surging back fully. Time to leave. I can already hear heavy boots in the corridors outside. Alarm from the gunfire, no doubt. If Arbites storm in now, they'll find a scene very hard to explain. The governor's supposed ally dead, an assassin standing amid the carnage. I'd rather not fight loyal Imperials if I can avoid it. With practiced motions, I pull a smoke grenade from my webbing and arm it. In one fluid throw, I hurl it at the door. It detonates with a loud pop hiss, filling the entryway with thick gray vapor. Shouts from beyond, confusion as they encounter the smokescreen. I dash to the shattered stained glass window behind the desk. The drop is at least 50 meters to the ground. My mask's rangefinder highlights a possible landing zone, a rain canopy over an adjacent lower roof, maybe 20 meters down and across. The office doors burst open behind me. Through swirling smoke, I glimpse Arbites silhouettes fanning into the room. I don't wait for them to challenge or open fire. I leap out of the window, into the stormy night, coat billowing. The impact as I hit the angled canopy is bone-jarring. I slide, then roll off, dropping the last few meters to the hard ferrocrete of a balcony below. Pain flares in my knee, a twist, nothing serious. I scramble up and keep moving, limping into the darkness as searchlights from the palace lance out, probing for the fleeing figure. But they won't find me. Within minutes, I'm swallowed by the labyrinthine alleys of the city's administrative quarter. I know exactly where to go. A backup extraction point I scoped out earlier, near a dry sewage canal. The storm drains will be overflowing now, but I can navigate them to reach the outskirts where my rendezvous transport lies hidden. As I run through the rain, I take stock. Governor Callistus is dead by my bullet. Inquisitor Tavik lies dead by my hand as well. The first kill may have been a mistake orchestrated by a traitor, but the second, Tavik's execution, feels like something else. Not a standard mission, but a duty nonetheless. Perhaps this is what separates a mere weapon from a true servant of the Emperor, the ability to recognize when the letter of an order diverges from the spirit of his will. I will have to answer for this. The Officio Assassinorum will learn that one of their own eliminated an Imperial Inquisitor without explicit sanction. That could end very badly for me. A bullet in the head from a fellow assassin, a quiet purge to appease the Inquisition's wrath. Or perhaps not, if my masters see reason. I did remove a dangerous traitor after all, but I know better than to rely on idealism within the Imperium's bureaucracy. Certainly the Inquisition's Ordo Sicarius, those charged with monitoring the Assassinorum, will take a keen interest in this incident. But I will present them the same proof. Let them see Tavik's treachery laid bare. If justice means anything, even they must recognize I did what was necessary. In the end, my fears of reprisal proved unfounded. The evidence I gathered spoke for itself. When I finally made my report to the Officio Assassinorum and the Ordo Sicarius, they quietly accepted my account. Tavik's treachery was kept secret from the wider Imperium. Officially, Governor Callistus's assassination was blamed on a heretical cult, and Inquisitor Tavik was recorded as another unfortunate casualty of the incident. There were no ceremonies, no commendations, and no punishments. I received only a brief acknowledgement from my superiors and, not long after, a new assignment slate with fresh coordinates and targets. The Imperial war machine did not stop for one compromised Inquisitor, and neither did I. If my superiors balk, I have one more resort: present the evidence directly to the Ordo Sicarius itself, the Inquisition's watchdogs over the Assassinorum. But I hope it won't come to that. I pause under an archway to catch my breath. Water drips off me in rivulets. I am weary, battered, my body a tapestry of aches and bruises. But I'm alive. For now. As I press on through the drenched streets, a small group of huddled citizens rush past me, heading toward the palace in morbid curiosity. They pay me no heed, just another cloaked figure in the gloom. One young man among them mutters, "They say the governor was shot by the Emperor's own wrath, like a bolt from heaven." His companion replies, "Emperor's judgment on a bad servant, maybe. Throne only knows what really happened." I allow myself a grim, fleeting smile at that as they disappear into the drizzle. The common folk will likely believe whatever story comes out of this, that Callistus was a traitor slain by Imperial justice. In a way, that's not untrue. Though the justice was twisted at first, it righted itself in the end. At the canal's edge, I find the maintenance hatch I had prepared, forced open now, as arranged with a simple remote charge I triggered earlier. Slipping into the storm drain, I wind my way through foul, cold water until I emerge outside the city's limits, into the dripping undergrowth of a wooded parkland. There, camouflaged beneath mud and vine, lies my extraction vehicle, a sleek one-man speeder bike, autopiloted to this spot days ago. I fire it up and mount. The engine hums almost silently, modified for stealth. Without hesitation, I gun it forward, racing low across the landscape. I don't head directly for any official port. Instead, I have a rendezvous with a friendly merchant ship in orbit that owes the Officio favors. They'll get me off-world quietly. As the wind whistles past and the city recedes behind me, I finally exhale fully. My shoulders sag a little, fatigue catching up. It's nearly over. In the end, no accolades and no blame will find me. Official records will show nothing amiss: a traitor killed by an assassin, an inquisitor killed by traitors. And I will continue my work as I always have, in silence. The horizon brightens imperceptibly. Dawn is near. By the Emperor's grace, I'll be off-planet by the time the sun fully rises. Another identity awaits me somewhere out there, perhaps a new name or number. The Officio might reassign me a new code designation to distance this incident from me. Fine. I rev the bike onward, towards the awaiting extraction point. There is a final strange sense of relief washing over me. For once, I took initiative not out of orders, but out of a genuine understanding of the Emperor's will. Or so I believe. It's almost empowering. Still, I don't delude myself. At the end of the day, I remain what I was molded to be, a weapon of the throne. And I'll be pointed at the next target soon enough. The difference now is, I will make sure it truly is a target that needs eliminating. Tavik taught me one lesson despite himself. Even an assassin must sometimes question, if only to be absolutely sure before taking the shot. It's a dangerous line of thought. I can almost hear the indoctrination screaming in protest. But it's there. No matter. I am confident that when next I am called upon, the prey will be deserving and the judgment true. And Emperor help them, for I will not. I realize I've been composing a quasi-confession in my mind, perhaps to justify tonight's actions to myself or some imagined tribunal. Habit of being alone too long, I guess, having no one to talk to but the whisper of my own thoughts. If someone were listening, maybe they'd even find a bit of dark humor in all this. No matter. My internal monologue ends here as dawn breaks and I prepare to depart. For the briefest moment, a memory of my parents crosses my mind, those I lost as a child to the Imperium's enemies. They would not recognize the man I've become. Sometimes I hardly recognize myself, but if they are watching from the Emperor's side, I hope they understand. I hope they know that every life I take is, in its own way, to spare countless others the fate that befell them. That thought brings me a small measure of solace as I turn my face toward the new day. I take one last look back at Arcadia 7's skyline and whisper under my breath, barely audible beneath my mask. One shot, one kill. It's the closest thing I have to a prayer. Then I face forward and gun the engine, disappearing into the morning mist. This is the life of an Imperial Vindicar assassin, unseen, unsung, but never unused. As long as I draw breath, I will remain in the shadows, doing what must be done, one kill at a time until there are no enemies left, or until someone finally manages to put a bullet in me. Either way, the Emperor's will is served.